Welcome to Showdown. I'm Mark Kasen, and it's Monday, and that's the 2nd of June, and we have all kinds of things coming at us from this last weekend, and of all of the things, and I have to say, it's not that this is the most important, but I think it's the most indicative of how pathetic it is that we're listening to people who are supposedly making laws or trying to decide how to run this country, and essentially they're doing it in a way that is beyond ridiculous. And I'm going to start with Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst was approached during a town hall meeting by some people who said, you know, if we get rid of Medicaid, people are going to die. And Joni's response was, well, sure, we're all going to die. And the outrage over such a ridiculous comment, that's pretty obvious. Certainly we're all going to die, but that doesn't mean that we should hasten the process. However, beyond that, the following day, Joni came forward and, as a great senator, spoke to the comments that she made and talked about her apology, her feeling of being sorry that she said something that might have been hurtful. And she wanted to explain that she really didn't mean it. But as it turned out, that isn't what she did at all. She really doubled down on the whole thing and made fun of the people who were sort of outraged by her original comment. And she started talking about things like the tooth fairy, and ultimately she ended up talking about Jesus and how if you embrace Jesus, you would be okay. At least you'd have everlasting life, I suppose, meaning that even though you might die now, you'd be doing a lot better in the long run. And that's what I thought was most interesting of all. It just goes to show what happens when people have absolutely no education. And, you would think that Senator Joni Ernst would have some, that she would know something about anything. Well, here's what I wanted to comment on. I haven't heard anybody refer to it, but this is a very famous comment that has long been used by economists, and that is the thoughts of John Maynard Keynes, a famous British economist who long ago, like 100 years ago, said when discussing the idea that we've got some economic theories here and, it may not work out right now. There may be problems now, sort of like tariffs. There may be problems now. But, in the long run, all of these things would work beautifully. And of course, that's what Donald Trump has tried to assuage all of us with, when we complain about the fact that what he's doing has been proven to bring depression along with it. But of course, Donald says, no, don't worry about that. In the long run, we'll be fine. And of course, John Maynard Keynes' response to that was, in the long run, we're dead. And the point is the exact opposite of what Joni Ernst was trying to explain to us, that the idea is you got to live here and now. People are going to die now. The long run, yeah, everybody will be dead in the long run, but that's not where we live. We don't live in the long run. We live now. And so that's really sort of the extension of that whole idiotic argument that was brought up by, unfortunately, one of the elite 100 senators of the United States of America. And, every channel, every station, every podcaster, broadcaster, everybody out here talking today and over the weekend pointed to this idea that where she says, we're all going to die, that's not a sufficient response for anyone when it comes to economic policy, which is what this is all about. And it is sort of interesting that in 2025, we've gotten to the point where one of our biggest arguments as a country is on economics. I mean, that's the odd thing, because, in many years past, the idea always was economics will bore you. Economics will put you to sleep. Economics, it's such a complicated area of discussion that people don't really want to hear it. And I think it's fair to say that people aren't really getting into this one either, as far as, really looking at what's happening in the weeds. They're not. No, that's not what's happening. But it is, one of the primary discussions that we're having as a nation, and that is, what are we going to do about our economic prospects as a country? Are we really on some kind of a magic course to global nirvana, which is sort of what Donald Trump is trying to sell? Or is this the kind of snake oil that Donald Trump has tried to sell throughout his career, and which has always ended in failure, disaster economically, complete loss, bankruptcy, people wiped out? And of course, Donald's response to that has been that, if you go bankrupt and you've put, millions of dollars or even billions of dollars into a project and you go bankrupt, what you're essentially doing is following the law, and that it's okay to follow the law, that bankruptcy is a way in which big-time investors who take large amounts of risk can walk away from a project and say, look, I gave it everything I've got, and it just didn't work, so I'm going to move on, and all of my obligations will be wiped out, because that's our system. Our system protects people who take risk by allowing them to walk away in the end and go off to start another project. Now, in the case of Donald, he has done this 6 times. Now, in a lifetime, that's a lot. That's an awful lot. And not to mention the fact that there's a whole lot of money that has been bankrupted through this process. That's money that he has borrowed or that has been invested with him, and which in the end, he has walked away from the obligations saying, I thought I could make it work. It didn't work. And here's the deal. He's doing this again with the United States of America. He's taking risks at all of our expense, hoping that somehow this idea of tariffs will suddenly work out in a way that has never happened before in history. And, it's really important to emphasize here that, first, it doesn't work. Tariffs don't work. I had a long discussion with Ray Hartman in the show that we did on Thursday, and Ray was saying that there are some circumstances in which limited tariffs have been beneficial. And actually, there's a little bit of truth in that, and a lot of people who are trying to stay out of trouble have used this argument that, tariffs, some of them are okay, some of them work out. Sometimes we want to protect an industry or even maybe a company. We want to protect some part of our economic scene in which we're operating. And so we raise these taxes on people that prevent them from stepping in and stepping on us. So we protect ourselves from people who would otherwise be harmful. Here's the problem. The problem is that there's another way to do this, and it's a way that we've used, for a good 100 years now, essentially since World War I. World War I was famous, among other things, for the fact that it was a time when global trade really blossomed. And that war sort of stepped on global trade and pushed it back in a way that was not helpful. And by the end of the war, we found, after a period of extreme successful expansion in the 1910s and 1920s, we found that, when the country went into depression, that in coming out of the depression, that we resorted to world trade as a way to create real economic growth around the planet. And it was successful. It worked great. And in fact, it has worked terrific for 100 years. And it has been to the benefit of the United States beyond every other country. If you look out here at who's successful and who isn't in the world, you can look at all these other companies, other countries, companies, everybody. The answer is simple. The United States has been the most successful of anyone on the planet when it comes to expanding economic activity through world trade. Now, there's another thing about world trade. And I've mentioned this before, and I'm not going to get into a long discussion about it, but it's something called comparative advantage. And the United States has comparative advantage in areas that have to do with services. We provide unbelievable services to the world, and they are scientific services, legal services, medical services, you name it. We have just been enormously successful, and we've become amazingly powerful as a result. And through this process of us taking advantage of our best areas for success, and that being this idea of providing services, we've grown to an economy that's $30 trillion, twice the size of our closest competitor, China. And in the meantime, up until Donald Trump, we were expanding substantially. And suddenly, with Trump coming on the scene, we have begun to contract. We went through a 3-month period of contraction, which Donald said, don't worry, this is all temporary, and we're going to really turn this thing way up and be enormously successful. One of the things he talked about is that there would be all of this money that would come in from tariffs, which would be used to get rid of something that Americans hate more than anything else that they ever deal with in their lives, and that's the income tax. I mean, there's no question. People in America do not like the income tax, and I'd have to say that most people don't like to have their income taxed so that they have money that comes into them, and then they have to turn around and turn it over to somebody else without their real desire to be to turn it over. I mean, when we go to the store to buy something, we know that we're gonna purchase it, and we do, and then we pay the bill. But when it comes to taxes, it's a little difficult because we're purchasing things that we want, like highways, like airports, like so many different areas of government that protect our lives, agencies that overlook food safety, environmental safety, all kinds of problems are addressed by our government, and somebody has to pay the bill, and that's us. We pay. And, for years I've said to people who complain about taxes that I know that you want these benefits, but you just don't want to pay for them. And the problem is that the way we sell this to people, we have not convinced anybody that it's a good idea to pay for the benefits that we get in the way that we do. Nobody wants to fill out that tax form. Nobody wants to pay the cost of having your taxes done by an expert when you've got complicated business problems that have to be addressed. It's just something we don't like. What we really like when it comes to taxes is we like something automatic. We like something that we don't have to think about. We like something that doesn't really seem to affect us directly, even though it does. And so that's what we're trying to balance in the world that we live in. We've done it for 100 years, and it's got a lot of people upset because they just hate the IRS. I mean, everybody does. And especially in 2025, if you call the IRS and you try to get them to answer the phone, they're not going to answer. I mean, when it comes to the IRS, first of all, they were always slow. Now, because we've cut back all the people who work there, it has become dramatically slow. And you could wait online for an hour. You could wait online for 2 hours in order to talk to somebody who might be able to help you to understand a problem that you would like to have addressed. And the thing about it is, we usually don't even like the answer that they give us, because it all comes back to this idea that you have to pay for things in a way that you don't like. So what we need to do as a country, and believe me, there are a lot of people who've written about this. There are an enormous number of books on it. There's one lady who I recommend to everybody, and when I recommend it, I'm going to say this to you. If you're not basically a scholar, don't even bother, because this is complicated stuff. But it's a book called The Land of Too Much, and that's about the abundance in America. And it's written by this woman, Monica, Prasad, Monica Prasad, and it's beautifully written, and it's just a great examination of the difference between how Europe pays its taxes and how we pay ours. But let me assure you of this. There's nothing in this book that even remotely suggests that we ought to be tariffing everybody and that that's the solution to paying our taxes. I mean, that's what Donald has tried to sell. It won't work. It's not significantly intelligent, and in fact, it's very damaging to world trade, because what it leads to is a gigantic war. It's a war. It's a trade war. And we are currently in a trade war. If you woke up this weekend and picked up a copy of the New York Times on Saturday or Sunday, you'd have read about exactly what I'm discussing, and that is a trade war that finds China extremely angry with us and attempting to find ways to retaliate against what Donald Trump is doing. And, what we don't want to do is find ourselves retaliating against the entire world. I mean, the United States is fighting against China, for sure. We're fighting against Canada. We're fighting against Mexico. We're fighting against all of Europe. We're fighting against Australia. In fact, we're fighting against everybody. You know, there was a joke that was told at a point where Donald was putting tariffs on these little islands around the world where there weren't even any people there. The only thing living on those islands were penguins. I mean, they've got taxes on them. I mean, the whole thing is just absurd. It doesn't make any sense. It's nothing that we really want to be dealing with. And instead, what we need to figure out, and I believe that we will once we get rid of this wannabe dictator, you know, I think what we're going to find is that we're going to have to look at our tax system and see if there are some ways to pay our taxes without overburdening people. One of the things about Europe is that they have a tax system where they don't have to fill out all these forms, and they do pay taxes, but the taxes are built into their purchases, and as a result, they pay for the things that they need and that they want, but at the same time, they don't feel the burden that we do in the United States, where we could sit on a phone line for 2 hours trying to reach the IRS and ending up with the phone line clicking off so that you then have to call back and spend another 2 hours waiting. And guess what? It's just not good. It's not good. It's not something that makes people feel comfortable with their government. In fact, it makes people feel, even though it's not true, that our government is incompetent. But the truth is that if you had enough people to answer those phones, well, it wouldn't take 2 hours for somebody to get to you. Now, they do have services in the country, but the IRS is not one of them. I don't know why. They have services where you call and they tell you the wait is going to be really bad. So what we recommend you do is push 1 on your phone. Just hit the 1 button, and it will put you in line. And when it gets to you, you'll get a phone call back, and then you'll be able to talk to the people you want to discuss things with. Now, even that won't solve all the problems, because I know you don't want to fill out all of these forms for the IRS, because one of the things, too, that happens when you fill out those forms is if you make a mistake or if something just doesn't hit the IRS the right way, the next thing you know, you got people calling you back and throwing accusations at you, and nobody wants to deal with that. But certainly it would be better if you didn't have to wait 2, 3, 4 hours on the phone line in order to deal with all of that insanity, and instead you could get a phone call back and somebody could talk to you in short order at the time in which your position in line would allow you to have yourself be part of that conversation. But none of that solves the ultimate problem. The ultimate problem is, how do we get things in this country that we want and pay for them, because you've got to pay for them. I mean, somebody's got to pay the bill. I don't care what you build. I don't care what you create. I don't care what services you provide. Whatever it is, somebody has got to pay the bill. Government employees, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, provide us with immense services, just fabulous services, enormous, very valuable. You know, I always talk about a really good example for me is the FDA and, the FCC and the FAA. So the Federal Communications Commission, which deals with telephones, and the FAA, which deals with airplanes. And there was a point about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, where 5G towers were going up for our cell phones, and at the same time, those towers, in some cases, were near airports, and they were potentially going to get in the way of our air traffic control. And you might have some planes, if not falling out of the skies, certainly bumping into each other or getting close, and we didn't want that. So ultimately what we did is we went to the experts. The experts at the FCC and at the FAA got together, and they figured out exactly how to position these towers so that they wouldn't interfere with the air traffic control people. You can't turn that responsibility over to a member of Congress or a senator or any elected official, not to a president. You have to turn that over to some kind of basically an engineer that can look at the problem and manage the distance between different towers and different signals, and to be sure that we get the signals that we need for our phone, and at the same time get the signals that we need to protect our airplanes from falling out of the sky. And they did it. They did the job. They made it work. That's our government at work when they're doing the best that they can possibly do. And so, essentially what we need is we need experts. And these experts need to be in charge of developing the best way to create the result that Congress decides that they want. So, for example, Congress says we want the most innovative cell phones, and we also want the safest airports. So now Congress tells us that's what we want, and the experts go to work to provide us with exactly what we want. That's how our system is supposed to work. But when you fire everybody and tens of thousands, 20, 30, 50,000 people are out of work in a day or 2 days or a week, what kind of services do you think you're going to get? You're going to get nothing but chaos. And that's exactly where we are. We've got chaos. Now, one of the areas of chaos that we know that we've been dealing with outside of this economic area that I like to talk about because it's really an area that's very important for us. But one of these areas has to do with immigration. And, I saw the governor of New York this morning, Kathy Hochul. She was on MSNBC, and she was talking about the fact that in New York, ICE, the people from immigration, are coming out after all kinds of people that have not done anything wrong. They have not committed crimes. People who have been in communities for 10, 15, 20 years. People who are recognized in their communities as basically, like we like to call them, pillars. That is, people that really support the work that we do in our communities. And some of these people are being attacked by ICE. ICE is coming and picking them up because they got the wrong last name, because they got the wrong color skin, because they talk in a way that ICE doesn't like. Maybe they speak 2 or 3 languages, maybe 4, and they come and get them, and they do these things to them that are just, it's abominable. It's horrible. It's dangerous, and it's really, at some point here, we've seen that some lives have been lost as a result, and of course, our government says, oh, well, those people are just criminals. They've lost lives without due process. And keep this in mind. We want due process. We do not want somebody coming to our door and saying, we've got you. We're carrying you away somewhere, and it's the end of you. Without a judge and a lawyer for us, being able to look at the situation and decide whether the accusation is true. Because, sometimes it's not. And in the case of these people who have been whisked away to El Salvador and Panama and some other places around the world, as I understand now there are maybe 20 or 30 places that we're looking at to contract with other countries in order to get them to take people that we don't want and to rush them into these essentially concentration camps and to say we're going to do it without due process. I mean, this is just so counter to what we do as a country or what we've done before. And I'll grant you, there have been years, 100, 200 years ago where we did some horrible things. We did bad things to black people. We did bad things to lots of people. Chinese, definitely. Japanese, they went to various camps during World War II. I mean, we did some things that were wrong. So we're not a good country sometimes. But we're supposed to aim to do better. We're supposed to be trying to accomplish something positive. Instead, what we're doing is grabbing up everybody that we don't like, and there are a bunch of people that we don't like in 2025. They got names that we don't like, they've got language that we don't like, they've got skin color that we don't like, and we're rushing them off to somewhere. Now, the truth is that we got a president of the United States who has all of these bizarre hatreds for different kinds of people, and so that really causes a problem. But additionally, we've got millions of people in the country who actually agree with him. That's how he got elected, and that's how he's getting away with some of the things that he's doing, even though his popularity is declining. And even though there are some people, like Kathy Hochul this morning, who have recognized that out in New York Harbor, which is not just about New York, it's about our entire country, that we do have a statue that welcomes these people to the United States. It encourages them to come. It explicitly says, we want you here, and we want you to come and breathe free with us and become part of the process that expands this country into a way that can be successful. Now, with all of that in mind, I'm going to go sell some things here in a minute, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk a little bit about AI in the midst of all of this, and it definitely connects to everything that we're talking about here. So first, let's talk about the St. Louis Suit Company. The St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton provides me with this: nice coats, nice ties, and terrific prices. And, when you talk about how successful the St. Louis Suit Company has been, let me remind you that they've been there in Clayton for 30 years. So you talk about success. You're there for 30 years. You've done something right. And the St. Louis Suit Company has done a lot right. They know the fashions, and they sell the fashions at very reasonable prices. And if you want an example, and I know it's an extreme example, but it's these ties. I mean, this tie that I got sitting here, that's $5. And I'm just telling you, you get a silk tie anywhere in America, it's going to cost you more than $5. But at the St. Louis Suit Company, it's not only $5, but if you buy 5 of them, it's going to be $20, which means $4 a tie. It's a bargain any way you cut it. And I don't care if you don't wear ties. Maybe you're looking for a gift to give to people who might wear ties. Or even if they don't, maybe they'll at least look at the tie and say, wow, that person was really thinking of me. And I can just tell you right now, the St. Louis Suit Company sells a whole lot of ties for $5 a tie. And then they also sell suits, and they sell shirts, and they sell shoes, and they sell overcoats, which everybody should be thinking about in the summer, because you get the bargains when it's hot out and people don't need an overcoat. When you need one, you're going to pay. But when you don't need one, it's a bargain. And let me also say that if you're thinking about a wedding, which people want to do all the time, I think, if you think about a wedding, you definitely want the St. Louis Suit Company, because they are experts at handling your wedding needs for your entire male wedding party. They're just great. They do the job. So check them out. St. Louis Suit Company. They're in Clayton. They're on the corner of Forsyth and Central in Clayton. You'll love Jay and Nick and the whole family at the St. Louis Suit Company. Now, if you're looking for jewelry, the place to go is 4506 Hampton, and that's Jewels on Hampton, and I promise you, you'll get a good deal on jewelry there. The prices are excellent. You go in, you talk to Al and his son AJ, and I can tell you right now, they'll address all of your issues, all of your problems, all of your thoughts when it comes to thinking about new jewelry. They help you to design jewelry. They design it themselves. They can help you do your own designs. They will fix things like watches. Now, I always talk about my 45-year-old gold Seiko that you can get that fixed at Jewels on Hampton. I promise you, they're great. They'll help you look at the situation with buying and selling coins and gold at a time when the price of gold has skyrocketed. You just need an expert like Al, and he's right there at 4506 Hampton. That is Jewels on Hampton. Now, if you go to Creve Coeur, that's just coming back west on Highway 40, you end up at 141 and Olive. And when you get there, you're going to find Telena's. And my good friend Mehdi, who has owned and run Telena's Italian Food for 40 years. I didn't say 30, I said 40. And they do a tremendous job at Telena's. They have all the pastas that you can imagine, so you'll love their food. And I mean to tell you, the food is really great. It's excellent. Everybody knows that. That's why they've been there for 40 years. But beyond that, I'm telling you this, the spaghetti and meatballs are unbeatable. That's the best of all. Now, I understand everybody likes different things, but for me, it is the spaghetti and meatballs. That's 141 and Olive. That's Telena's Italian Food. Mehdi, the great owner of that great Italian restaurant in Creve Coeur. So that is, again, Telena's. And then finally, if you go even further west, you'll find yourself out in Chesterfield, and you'll go to a restaurant out there that's called Wenty's. Wente. Wenty's is just a great overall restaurant. They're famous for their wings. Their wings are terrific. Everybody says you got to get the hot wings at Wenty's, and that might be true. Ben has a beautiful restaurant out there. The wings, they say, are great. I've never had them. I just am not a wing person. But what I am is a baby back ribs person. I love their baby back ribs. And their baby back ribs and their onion rings go together for me. I love them. They're great. They also have hamburgers. They have cheeseburgers. They have salads. They have everything. Their iced tea is outstanding. It's a great restaurant. You'll love the atmosphere. You'll love Ben. You'll love Wenty's. Go check them out. 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road. That is Wenty's. Okay, so let me bring you back to AI. because AI isn't going to cook your food at Wendy's or at Telena's, at least not yet. Maybe someday they will. I don't know. Let me say this about AI. I have said for years that robots were really coming on strong. There's some great robotics companies on the New York Stock Exchange that produce the robots that are used in manufacturing, not just in the United States, because we're not mainly a manufacturing country, but around the world for sure. These robots are just an important part of our culture and becoming more important every day. There's a company on the New York Stock Exchange, or actually NASDAQ, Intuitive Surgical, ISRG, and they have robots that literally perform surgeries for you, with the guidance of the doctors, but the robotic arms can be used in order to be sure to not cut arteries, in order to be sure to catch the exact right spot in your body that those arms are supposed to go in and dig in and figure out what has to be moved or cut out or whatever it is that they have to do in the surgery. I mean, there's no question that robotics, and this is not just 2025, this has been really a couple of decades, robotics have been growing in importance in our culture. Well, in addition to these robotics, now we've got this artificial intelligence which allows robots to learn in a way that helps them to make decisions that can help us to make decisions. Now, I understand that there are people talking about having robots drive cars or drive cabs. I have to tell you, in my lifetime, I doubt that I will ever be willing to jump into a cab that is driven by a robot. I mean, I'm not saying that the people who drive cabs or cars or buses or any of this are perfect. They're not. But I just have to say that if we're going to start relying on these robots to drive our cars, I don't trust it. Now, like I say, maybe I'm making a mistake, and maybe in 10 or 20 years, we'll all look at this and laugh and say, of course this is safe. Of course this makes sense. Of course we could have these drivers. And if that's true, okay, maybe. But I'm going to say no. No for me at this point. And yet, there's a lot of talk about what AI can do for us and what we should expect it to do for us, the kinds of learning that AI can create in a way that may even exceed our abilities to learn in some areas, probably areas having to do with science, probably areas having to do with medical problems. That seems to be a direction that would have great value for us. And there may even be similar opportunities in terms of space travel, both traveling through space using robots and even designing ways to get these vehicles into space using robots that learn for us. Maybe so. I don't know. I know this is for somebody else beyond me. But I want to suggest this way of thinking about it that might help you to understand where we are and what we can do. And that is, if you go back a long time ago now to 1956, that's about 70 years ago, and the Russians put a satellite into outer space, and that satellite was called Sputnik. And at the time that Sputnik went into orbit, a lot of people believed that the United States was in serious trouble, that we were losing some kind of advantage, especially in space travel, and the Russians were going to far exceed our abilities, and that the result of all of this was going to be that the United States was going to find itself sort of at the bottom of the barrel with Russia leading the way in all kinds of technological innovation. And here we are, 70 years later, and guess what? None of that was true. The United States led the way in terms of space travel, in terms of technology, in terms of these different satellites. And I mean, there are so many satellites out there in outer space now, it is unbelievable. And the United States has led the way in all of this. It's not to say that other countries aren't there too. Certainly China is. The Russians, to some extent, are still part of this, especially when it comes to weaponry, because that's been an important thing for them. But by and large, the Russians have been far behind us. The Chinese have been struggling to keep up with us. And so, you know, we have a lot of capability here in our country. And it's amazing how we sort of diminish in our own minds what our capabilities really are. It's a fear that has not proven to be true, but which could become true for a simple reason. Again, Donald Trump stepping in and blocking foreign students in all of our universities, and at the same time taking away from our universities the important money, the resources necessary in order to create the kinds of advanced technology that will ultimately move the world forward. I'm not afraid that AI is going to take us over and that we're going to be like a science fiction movie and that we're all going to end up with robots controlling our lives, or that we're going to end up like, unfortunately, a movie that is really a pretty good movie, but it sort of scares the heck out of me, and that's Will Smith's I Am Legend. You know, and especially that movie bothered me from a couple of standpoints. Of course, those zombies who were attacking everybody, that wasn't good. And then, of course, the fact that they were attacking the dogs. You know, I love dogs, and it just really, it was difficult for me to watch what happened to the dogs. But here's the point. If we have our universities leading the way in terms of trying to find the ways to protect us from all these different kinds of things that might be attacking us, the bugs and the viral spreading and the way that these things are able to adjust to their environment and overcome. Like we find a vaccine, and next thing you know, a virus is finding a way to overcome the vaccine. And the way to fight it is by having medical people that are operating at such a high level that they're able to deal with the problem. Okay, so that makes sense. And guess what? Here we are, 2025. We've got those people at universities, or we certainly did 2 months ago. We had them. We're trying to get rid of them now. We're trying to block all the foreign students. We're trying to take away all the grants from universities that will allow them to do the research that we need to protect our lives. But then on top of that, what is Donald doing? He's telling us no vaccines. Get rid of them. Drop them. Now, I know that RFK, in the process of telling us that the vaccines are no good, he has said, okay, at the same time, don't just take my word for it. Go to the doctor. Go to your doctor and listen to what your doctor says. But you know what? They've opened a door that is very difficult to shut. It's a door that's opened up the potential for the spread of polio and measles and possibly avian flu. That's something that might be coming down the pike. And then, of course, even COVID, which is another problem. And here we are coming into 2025's fall season. That'll be after, of course, the summertime. And we've already begun to see during the summer that there is a brand of COVID that is coming after us again. And we know that there are vaccines that we can create that can fight against this. But our government is telling us, unlike in the past, to forget these vaccines, that only very limited groups of people should have access to them. Some of these would be older people. Some of these would be people who have certain kinds of diseases that put them at risk, especially things that might affect your ability to breathe. And so they want to, maybe allow the vaccines for some of those people. But essentially saying, look, kids, no, do not vaccinate your kids against the upcoming spread of COVID, whatever the sort of COVID is going to be. Do not think about either avian flu, which the doctors are all saying could be the next pandemic. Our government is saying, no, forget it all. We're not going to deal with any of this. And in fact, we're going to diminish the use of these vaccines to a point where the insurance companies are likely to turn around and say, if the government isn't suggesting that we use these things, we're going to refuse to pay for them. And then you'll have to pay, maybe you'll be able to get a vaccine. Maybe you're an 80-year-old person that is going to have some breathing problems, and you may need to get vaccines for COVID, but how do you get it? You may have to go out and pay for it. And you may have to pay $100, $200, $300 for a vaccine that right now, today, is covered by your insurance company. You walk into CVS or Walgreens or any of these places, and you're going to get these vaccines in a month, in 6 months, in a year. We don't know what you're going to get. We know this, that our government is cutting out the research. Our government is cutting out the researchers. Our researchers who might have gone to MIT or Columbia or Harvard or any of our great schools, well, now they're thinking about going to Cambridge. They're thinking about going to Oxford. They're thinking about going to the Sorbonne in France. They're thinking about going everywhere in the world, but getting out of Dodge. Get out of the United States, because, first of all, they're going to throw you out. They're going to come in and grab you up, and they're going to put you on an airplane and send you somewhere. If you're lucky, you'll end up at Oxford or possibly some great university in Europe, if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, you might find yourself in El Salvador if somebody decides that your last name isn't right, that your skin color isn't right, that something that you're doing is setting off alarms with ICE, and boom, the next thing you know, they whisk you away to wherever they want to send you. We're doing that today in the United States. Now, the courts have stood up against some of this, but at the same time, the Supreme Court came up and they put 500,000 Venezuelans in jeopardy because a program that had been set up by Joe Biden was not supported by the Supreme Court. So, Donald got one win out of about 100, but in terms of those 500,000 Venezuelans, it's a real problem. I mean, you do not want to be one of those people with people coming after you looking for all kinds of problems. Well, those are some of the problems that we face in 2025, and they're all Donald Trump-driven problems. But let me also say this, and here's something I said last week, and I wanted to mention this before we got off the air today, because I knew it. I knew it when it happened, and I commented on it at the time, and, it's not surprising how it ended up. And here's what it was. We all learned that Joe Biden had prostate cancer. We learned that it had spread to his bones. We learned that it was a cancer that was extremely aggressive. And all over the country, people stepped up and said, whatever our politics are, we don't want Joe Biden to suffer from some kind of a dramatic form of cancer. And it's spread to his bones, and it's a potentially very painful disease. It takes a long time to kill you, but at the same point, the time that's involved could find you experiencing substantial pain. So, this is not a good thing, and nobody you would expect would be coming forward and saying, gee, Joe Biden was a bad man, and, his son did blah, 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 his, laptop and all of that nonsense, and so therefore, we want Joe Biden to suffer. I never heard anybody saying that. And at the time, and this was what was so interesting, at the time, Donald Trump stepped up and said, we feel bad about the fact that Joe Biden has this cancer. He said those words. And when he said those words, that next day, I was in front of a camera and I said, don't believe him. Because he's going to say, for 1 minute, he's going to say, yeah, I feel bad for the guy who's got a bad kind of cancer. And he said it. He said it for a moment. And guess what he's saying now? He's saying that Joe Biden is a sleazeball, that he's scum, and that he deserves to have the cancer. And if you haven't heard it, go pull it up on Google, because when I heard it, I just chuckled to myself, because I knew that Donald Trump did not have the capability, the capacity to look at somebody and feel sorry for their bad fortune. It's just not something that this man is capable of. He's just a very bad person who just hates everybody and has clearly been on the prowl when it comes to trying to destroy the United States. He's going everywhere, in every direction, doing everything he can to wreck America. Vladimir Zelensky, what a smart man. Vladimir Zelensky turned around after being berated by Donald Trump in the White House, walked away from it smartly, said very little, and this weekend he brought on Russia, what they're now calling the Pearl Harbor of Russia. He destroyed all those Russian airplanes that were dropping bombs on his cities, and he proved to be a very smart man. And what did Donald say about him? Called him every kind of name you could imagine. Turned out, Volodymyr Zelensky has given problems to Vladimir Putin that I don't think Vladimir's really enjoying right now. And in fact, one intelligence person said that there seems to be a belief in Russia that if that war isn't ended in 6 months, that Vladimir fears that he'll be hanging from a lamppost in Red Square. It's not maybe something that I want to see happen. I don't like people hanging from lampposts unless it's Hitler or Mussolini or Putin, or I suppose we'll see. You never know. Someday it may be Donald Trump. But right now it's time to go. I appreciate your time with us, and we're doing a lot of better things here with the show. There are going to be telephone calls where you can talk to me very soon on the air, and everything's coming together, and we hope you're enjoying it. And I will see you on Thursday, Monday and Thursday. So I'll be back Thursday at 4 o'clock. I'm Mark Kasen. This is Showdown. Good night.